2, 1.
Boom! And welcome to the Big Honker Podcast. Today, brought to you by Boss Shot Shells. Check out anything you need for your dove loads, your goose loads, waterfowl loads, and your trap loads. You can check them out at BossShotShells.com. It's all we shoot here at the Big Honker Lodge, BossShotShells.com. I'm Jeff Stanfield with the world famous Andy Shaver.
Yep, it all starts up in about 6 weeks, so start getting that stuff coming to your door.
My day is today.
June 18th. Wednesday this year.
Do you know who the first woman was to cross the transatlantic in a flight?
Yes.
Who is it?
Amelia Earhart.
That's right. And today is the day that happened. It would have been June 18th, 1928. Earhart became famous. The press dubbed her as Lady Lindy because she kind of resembled Mr. Charles Lindbergh. She was the first person to fly across the transatlantic as a woman. Now, Amelia Earhart was born in 1897 in Atchison, Kansas, as the daughter of Samuel Earhart and Amelia Amy. She was born in the home of her maternal grandparents, who was a former judge in Kansas, the president of the Savings Bank, and a leading resident of town. Earhart was the second child of the marriage after stillbirth in 1896. She was part German. According to family custom, Amelia Earhart was named after two grandmothers, Amelia and Mary Wells Patton. So that's where they got her name. The Earhart sisters, Amelia and Grace, who from her teenage years went by her middle name Muriel, remained with the grandparents in Atchison while their parents moved into the new, smaller quarters in Des Moines, Iowa. During this period, the Earhart girls received homeschooling from their mother and a governess. Amelia later said she was exceedingly fond of reading and spent many hours in the large family library. In 1909, when the family was reunited in Des Moines, the Earhart children were enrolled in public school for the first time, and Amelia entered 7th grade. The Earhart's family finances seemingly improved with the acquisition of a new house and the hiring of two servants, but it soon became apparent Edwin was an alcoholic. In 1914, he was forced to retire. He attempted to rehabilitate himself through the treatment, but the Rock Island Railroad never reinstated him. About that time, Earhart's grandmother, Amelia Otis, died, leaving a substantial estate that placed her daughter's share in a trust. Fearing Edwin's drinking would exhaust the funds, the Otis house was auctioned along with its contents. Amelia later described these events as the end of her childhood. In 1915, after a long search, Edwin found work as a clerk at the Great Northern Railway in St. Paul, Minnesota, where Amelia entered Central High School as a junior. Edwin applied to transfer to Springfield, Missouri in 1950, but the current claims officer reconsidered his retirement and demanded his job back, leaving Edwin unemployed again. Amy took the children to Chicago, where they lived with friends. Amelia Amelia canvassed nearby high schools in Chicago to find the best science program. She rejected the high school nearest her home, complaining the chemistry was just like a kitchen sink. She enrolled eventually in Hyde Park High School, but spent a miserable semester, to which a yearbook caption noted, "The girl in brown who walks alone." Then during Christmas of 17, Earhart visited her sister in Toronto, Canada, when she saw wounded soldiers returning from World War I. She became a nurse's aide for the Red Cross. Earhart began working with the Voluntary Aid Detachment at Spadina Military Hospital, where her duties included food prep for patients, special diets, blah, 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 blah. Here's what gets good. In the 20s, Earhart and young woman friend visited an airfield in conjunction with the Canadian National Exhibition in Toronto. The interest aroused me to me in Toronto that led me to all the air causes in the vicinity. One of the highlights of the day was a flying exhibition put on by World War I ace. The pilot saw Earhart and her friend, who were watching from an isolated clearing, and dived at them. I'm sure he said to himself, "Watch me make them scamper." I did not understand it all at the time, but I believe this little airplane said something to me as it swished by. So anyways, her dad took her and got her to do some flying lessons. A 10-minute flight with Frank Hawk, who later gained fame as an air racer, cost $10, equivalent to $160 today. By the time I'd gotten 200 or 300 feet off the ground, I knew I had to fly. The next month, Earhart engaged Nita Snook to be her flying instructor. The initial contract was for 12 hours of instruction for $500. It's basically $9,000 a day. Working at a variety of jobs, including photographer, truck driver, and stenographer at the local telephone company, Earhart saved $1,000 for flying lessons. She had her first lesson on January 3rd, 1921, and she became a pilot. Anyways, she ended up going through all of her grandmother's money. She did some bad investments.
You'll have that.
She had some health issues. She had a lot of sinus problems and stuff. She went to Columbia University. She ended up dropping out because she couldn't afford it. She went teaching. Then, in 1928, she became the first woman to cross the Atlantic Ocean in an airplane. The project coordinators include publisher and publicist George Putnam, who later became her husband. She was a passenger with the Flame flown by Wilmer Stoltz and co-pilot Lewis Gordon. On June 17th, the team departed to Newfoundland. Then on the 18th, they made their flight across the transatlantic, and they landed in England, where she received a rousing welcome. She became an automatic celebrity, even though she wasn't even the one pilot. She accepted a position as associate editor at Cosmo magazine and used it to campaign for greater public acceptance for aviation. Anyway, she married her public relations manager, George Putnam, lived a life of luxury, but she was divorced in 29. He was okay. Let me go back on this. It was a marriage of George Putnam and Putnam's mother's house in Newark, Connecticut, which had been described as a marriage of convenience. Earhart had been engaged to Samuel Chapman, a chemical engineer, but she broke off the engagement. Putnam, who was known as a GP, was divorced in 29 and sought out Earhart, proposing to her 6 times before she agreed to marry him. Earhart referred to her marriage as a partnership with dual control. Now,
well, that's all right.
Let me tell you something. In 1920, on May 20th, 1932, Earhart took off on a flight. She intended to fly to Paris in her single-engine Lockheed. Her technical advisor flight was the Norwegian-American aviator Bernd Balken, who helped prepare the aircraft. After a flight lasting 14 hours and 56 minutes, during which she contended with strong northerly winds, icy conditions, and mechanical problems, Earhart landed in a pasture north of Derry, Northern Ireland. The landing was witnessed. As the first woman to fly solo nonstop across the Atlantic, Earhart received the Distinguished Flying Cross from Congress. So she did all kinds of solo flights. She went from Honolulu to Oakland. She flew from the Metropolitan Opera in New York. They took off and went off from Los Angeles to New York City. She did everything. But it all came crashing down. On July 2nd, 1937, they loaded the Electra airplane. Their destination was Howland Island, a flat sliver of land. The expected flying time was about 20 hours, accounting for 2 hours. Time zone difference between Ley and Howard, and the crossing of the international date line. In preparation for the trip to Howland Island, the U.S. Coast Guard had sent the cutter USS Tasca to the island to offer communications and navigation. Around 3 p.m., Earhart reported her altitude at 10,000 feet. They reduced the altitude to thick clouds. Around 5 p.m., Earhart reported her altitude at 7,000 feet. The first calls received from Earhart were routine reporting stating the weather was cloudy and overcast. These calls were broken up by static. The aircraft was a long distance from Howland. At 6:14, another call was received stating the aircraft was within 200 miles and requesting that the ship use its direction finder to provide a bearing for the aircraft. The last voice transmission received in Howland Island from Earhart indicated she and Noonan were flying along a position running north to south. After all contact with Howland Island was lost, attempts to reach the flyers with voice and Morse code transmissions were made. Operations across the Pacific in the United States. Basically, she crashed, disappeared. They don't know what happened. On 10 a.m., July 2nd, 1937, and they did search efforts, and then they finally, a year and a half later, said that she was dead. But anyways, that was Amelia Earhart, who was a great flyer. She was big friends with the Roosevelt lady. I'm not wondering if she wasn't into women more than men.
Might have been.
Anyways, that's my person. Now, my person who died today was the Say Hey Kid. Do you know who that is?
No, and he's on, so.
Is he?
Yep.
All right, well.
Go ahead.
Oh, Say Hey Kid. Willie Mays. Willie Howard Mays. Born May 6, 1931 in Westfield, Alabama. Primarily black company town near Fairfield. His father, Cap Mays, was a talented baseball player with a black team at the local plant. Negro professional leagues he began playing in the Negro leagues in 1948 when he played briefly during the summer of the Chattanooga Choo-Choos, a Negro minor league team. Later that year, Mays joined the Birmingham Black Barons and the Negro American Leagues. Everything that the black player wanted or didn't get, then they got later was because of Willie Mays. Right. Jackie Robinson and Willie Mays were huge players. Several major league teams were interested in signing Mays, but they had to wait until he graduated from high school to offer him a contract. The Boston Braves and Brooklyn Dodgers both scouted him, but New York Giants scout Eddie Montague signed him to a $4,000 contract. Mays spent the rest of 1950 with the Class B Trenton Giants, batting .353. Promoted to AAA Minneapolis Millers, the American Association, he batted .477.
Phew.
He was the National League Rookie of the Year in 1951. After the 1951 season ended, Mays learned the United States Army had drafted him to serve in the Korean War. Before he left the Army, Mays played the first week of the 52 season with the Giants. He batted .236 with 4 home runs and 23 RBIs. After his induction into the Army on May 29th, Mays reported to Fort Eustis in Virginia, where he spent much of the time playing for the Fort Eustis Wills military baseball team. It was at Fort Eustis that Mays learned the basket catch from fellow Fort Eustis outfitter Al Fortutino. Mays, by his own estimation, played 180 games for the Wills and missed only about 275 games for the Giants because of his military service. He was a World Series champion and an MVP, and he is one of the greatest player ever, the Say Hey Kid, Willie Mays. Now, a person that was born today was probably in the greatest band ever to play music, and I'm not big fans of theirs.
Motley Crue.
No.
White Snake.
No.
Def Leppard.
No.
Don't know.
No. A group called the Beatles.
Oh, yeah, not a fan.
I was not a fan of him. He was born July 18th, 1942. At the age of 15, on June 6th, McCartney met John Lennon and his band, the Quarrymen, at the St. Peter's Church Hall in Woolton. The Quarrymen played a mix of rock and roll and skiffle, a type of popular music with jazz, blues, and folk. Soon afterwards, the members of the band invited McCartney to join as a rhythm guitarist. He formed a close working relationship with Lennon. Harris joined in 1958 as lead guitarist, followed by Lennon's art school friend Stuart Sutcliffe from bass. By 1960, the band had tried several names, including Johnny and the Moondogs, Beatles, and the Silver Beatles. They adopted the name of the Beatles in 1960 and recruited drummer Pete Best shortly before a 5-engagement residency in Hamburg. So, if you're a band person and you're a musician, you'll love the Beatles probably.
Not me.
I'm not a Beatles fan. I don't really have a lot to say about the Beatles, except they were a great band, arguably one of the greatest bands to ever be around. Paul McCartney is one of the wealthiest men to ever play. So good for the Beatles. Willie Mays, proud of Willie Mays, and Amelia Earhart, a great story of history. So that's June 18th. Thank you. Peace. Goodbye. God bless.
Watch for deer.